Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. Goodness gracious, here we are. Charles Bediako, the former Alabama basketball player, has been in the G League for the last 3 years. Apparently, Charles Bediako is coming back to play college basketball this Saturday. It's crazy. It's insane. There is a lot to dive into. Listen, there's no easy way to get to all this, so I'm going to jump in a lot of different directions, but that guy right there, Charles Bediako, was a member of the Alabama Crimson Tide basketball program from 2021 to 2023. He's gone, but as the old say, what was it, the Eminem song? I was gone for a minute, but I'm back again. Charles Bediako is back. Is there anything the NCAA can do? Let's go ahead and dive into this. So bottom line is, listen, it's going to take a minute. So forgive me, because I know some of you, Torres, you just ramble and you talk too much. There's a lot of context here. I'm going to do my best to make sense of it all. But really, this Charles Bediako story, at minimum, starts about 5 weeks ago with the James Naji story. Now, if you remember on this show, about 5 weeks ago, it was right around Christmas. I believe it was Christmas Eve day. James Naji, a player who had been drafted in the NBA draft, 31st overall pick, I believe, in 2023. He is cleared to play for Baylor. And so at the time we talked about it, by the way, for all Bama fans that are going to say, Torres, you're only picking on us because we're Bama, I was critical of the James Naji decision by the NCAA to allow a player who was drafted to be eligible. But why I got so worked up at the time was pretty straightforward, because you had people, Seth Davis, whatever. I sort of like Seth, but he's sort of a pain in the butt. And Seth was like, it's not a big deal. He's not even good. Who cares? Well, here was the issue at the time, which was going to be the issue going forward, is that coaches were going to keep pushing eligibility limits to see who they could get eligible, right? It started with, hey, we're going to bring these Europeans in from overseas. They never played in college. They just want a college education. They might be 22 or 23, but let them play. Then it was, well, what about these players that have been in the G League that never signed a professional NBA contract? They're no different than Euros. The only difference is their professional status is in the U.S., blah, 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 blah. That was London, Johnson, Louisville, etc. Then you had James Naji, and my issue with James Naji was never specifically about James Naji. It was that you knew these coaches were going to continue to push boundaries, see how far the NCAA would allow them to go. And I remember at the time saying this on the show, and people made fun of me, Torres, you're making stuff up. I said, listen, I know for a fact I can name at least one school that at the time was saying, can we get an NBA? Can we get a dude who played in the NBA back to college basketball? And so basically everybody at the time's calling me a liar, don't know what you're talking about, whatever. And so this Charles Bediako case brings it all full circle. James Naji is cleared to play after going through the NBA draft process. And now Alabama is trying to get a player eligible that went through the NBA draft process, renounced his draft rights, and wants to now return to play college basketball after playing 3 years professionally here in the United States. This is different than James Naji. This is bad. I support the NCAA fighting this, and it's absolutely crazy. Okay, so first of all, a little bit of context. Again, Charles Bediako played 2 years at Alabama, 2021 to 2023. He was part of that team that made the Sweet 16. They were the #1 overall seed. They had Brandon Miller. They were certainly in the headlines for all the wrong reasons that year. But that season, Charles Bediako decides, I am going to go pro. He declares for the draft, tests the waters. I remember at the time even thinking, why is this guy staying in the draft? He's not that good. Well, he has played 3 years and seeing everything going on in college basketball. And again, I apologize for jumping all over, but this is important context. He decides he wants to come back. On Monday, You see the first report that he is going to go try to get a temporary restraining order. That ends up happening. Matt, you can pop up the first statement from the NCAA. So on Monday, and I know I'm all over the place, I'm just doing my best, but the NCAA put out a statement on Monday after the reports first surfaced that he was trying to get eligible. It said the NCAA is aware of media reports about a suit filed against the NCAA by Charles Bediako. Mr. Bediako signed 3 NBA contracts after competing in college for 2 seasons. The NCAA has not and will not grant eligibility to any prospective or returning student athletes who have signed an NBA contract. Eligibility rules ensure high school students, get a fair shot at earning scholarships, and we will continue to consistently apply and defend these rules. So listen, I like that statement up until the end. And for people who are a little confused, what is the gray area? I'll be transparent. What I was told was pretty straightforward, is that 2 things. One, the ways that you are not eligible for college basketball are 2 things. One, if you're outside of the 5-year window that you would normally be in to play college basketball, right? Every player gets 5 years after they graduate high school to play 4. You know that. So that's why, in theory, LeBron James can't say, I have 4 years of eligibility, I'm coming back to college. The other rule that we thought was the case was that if you've ever signed an official NBA contract or if you have played in an NBA game, you are not eligible. And so for people asking me, because I got plenty of Bama fans, Torres, you weren't this worked up when it was Baylor, but now that it's Bama, you're coming after us. One, first off, I was mad when the James Naji thing happened. I said at the time it shouldn't be allowed. I said I didn't like the precedent. But 2, there is a big fundamental difference, really 2 as a matter of fact. James Naji, yes, he was drafted, but he never played in the United States. He never actually even signed an NBA contract. He was drafted. His rights were retained by an NBA team, but he never came to the United States. He never signed a technical NBA contract, and he was basically a free agent in Europe like everybody else. The other major difference, it is that the NCAA has not cleared Charles Bediako. So the NCAA did clear James Naji at Baylor, and you can argue, was it the right decision or the wrong decision? But Baylor submitted his argument to the NCAA. They cleared him. They said it was okay. The NCAA has not cleared Charles Bediako. As a matter of fact, Matt, you can put up the second statement, because on Tuesday, Charles Bediako did get a temporary restraining order in a Tuscaloosa court that said that he is eligible to play and the NCAA cannot stop him from playing. The NCAA put out a second statement. These attempts to sidestep NCAA rules to recruit individuals who have finished their time at college or signed NBA contracts are taking away opportunities from high school students. A judge ordering the NCAA to let a former NCAA player take the court Saturday against actual college students is exactly why Congress must step in and empower college sports to enforce our eligibility rules. So that was the second statement. So the first statement was when the reports came out that he was going to try to get eligible. The second statement happened after, again, for people who don't understand, Charles Bediako went to an Alabama court, received a temporary restraining order. The temporary restraining order says that the NCAA cannot limit him and not allow him to not play on Saturday when Alabama next takes the court against Tennessee. So for all intents and purposes, it feels like we are going to see Charles Bediako on the court for Alabama. This is a total disaster. And I do think there is one, I do think there's one thing the NCAA must do. And so again, to reiterate, what makes this different is 2 things. He was part of college basketball, declared for the draft, renounced his rights, and decided, you know what, I'm going to go be a pro. Now he's not good enough. Now he's not trying to come back. By the way, the new twist out of Alabama is that, he's coming back to campus to try and earn his degree. No, he's coming back to campus to try to play college basketball because he's not a good pro. Charles Bediako played in a G League game as recently as last weekend, okay? So don't tell me he's trying to come back to college. And let me also say this. For people who say this isn't a big deal, who cares, he's not that good, Let me just spend half a second explaining that part. And again, I understand I'm jumping around, but there's so much here. Why this matters, why it's a huge deal is because essentially, if Charles Bediako is cleared to play and plays in college basketball, what it essentially means is that there is no NBA draft deadline, right? Every May, we do the NBA draft deadline, and these guys declared, and these guys are going to stay, and these guys are going to go. Well, if Charles Bediako can go through the draft process, renounce his college rights, and decide I'm going to stay in the NBA draft, then return to college basketball, it means we have no NBA draft deadline. And so this is something that's worth noting. Not only does the NCAA want to nip in the bud, but also the NBA as well. Because if Charles Bediako can do this, then let's use an extreme example. What if AJ DeBonsa decides to go into the NBA draft? Obviously, he's going to after the year. Then he gets drafted by the Wizards or the Hornets or some franchise he doesn't want to play for. What's to stop him from saying, I'm not going, I'm going back to BYU? Or go to training camp and say, I'm not going, I'm going back to BYU. Or midway through his rookie year, say, screw this place, it's dysfunctional, I'm going back to BYU. And so, again, it's not just about Charles Bediako, it's about the precedent that is being set, and it's why I'm with the NCAA on this one. And the one thing that I will say that I have yet to hear anybody make a definitive statement on until I said it yesterday is this. What the temporary restraining order, what the court ruling said on Wednesday in Alabama is this. The NCAA cannot bar Charles Bediako from playing for Alabama. But here is my argument. You said that he is not eligible. So if Charles Bediako plays, you can't show up with police and escort him off the court when he tries to check in. But what you can do is say he is an ineligible player. We have made it clear he is an ineligible player, and any game that Charles Bediako plays will be deemed a forfeit. We've talked this is like the oldest NCAA stuff in the book, right? Is you go back to ineligible players 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. You couldn't play, you sat them. If you played them, they were not eligible. You had to forfeit. And so to me, it's pretty cut and dried. Matt, you can pop up my tweet because I said this yesterday. I said, you've said he's ineligible, so it seems pretty straightforward to me. You've said he's ineligible. Any game he plays counts as a loss in the record books for Alabama. Those losses impact seeding or NCAA tournament candidacy altogether. It seems simple to me. And so, of course, the lawyers came out, and we got a lot of lawyers on Twitter. Okay. By the way, we got some lawyers that listen to this show. And listen, I'm not saying that this is the perfect solution, and I'm not saying that it's not going to get fought in court. But again, you can't limit Charles Bediako from playing, but what you can say is if you play, your team forfeits games. And I bring it up because I don't know if I spurred this out of other people, but this seems to now be the consensus in college sports. Dave Benedict, who, if you don't know the name, is the UConn athletic director. He does follow me on Twitter, so maybe he saw me say this. He released a statement to Pete Thamel, who essentially said the same thing that I did. Charles Bediako, you can't keep him from playing, but you can punish Alabama for actually playing him. Here is Dave Benedict's statement to ESPN. If legally we can't control or impose NCAA rules in terms of who can play and who can't based on a legal decision, the NCAA still has a right to determine what games count towards the NCAA tournament and what games don't count. The NCAA has deemed Charles Bediako ineligible. Fine, he can play on the judge's ruling. It doesn't mean the games need to count towards the NCAA tournament. Otherwise, throw away the rule book and set it on fire. There are no rules. That was UConn AD Dave Benedict talking about Charles Bediako. I don't know if he stole that straight from my Twitter feed, but I think he's right. Listen, the NCAA is going to fight this. They will probably lose it in court, but they have to stand up for something. They have to draw a line in the sand somewhere. And I know you can't fight every guy that's trying to get eligible. You know, you fought Diego Pavia in court, you lost. You fought this case, you lost. And they have tried to be flexible. But they have also very clearly stated, well before Alabama started this process, that if you have signed an NBA contract or played an NBA game, you are not eligible to play. And so to me, yes, the NCAA should fight this for the simple fact that you have to draw the line in the sand somewhere, and you have to say that enough is enough. We're not just going to allow you to do whatever you want. Here's the other part. If you lose in court, who really cares? Fight it for 2 months. By then, Alabama will either not have played him, his eligibility will have run out, or they will have played him, and guess what? They're going to forfeit a bunch of games. They're not going to be eligible for the tournament, and guess what? Sorry, dude, 2026 is a wipe. So I bring it up because I feel like this is the only course of action. Now, it's 11:23 Eastern time. The NCAA has not made a statement on what will happen to Alabama if they play Charles Bediako, but it feels like this notion of if you're going to play an ineligible player, your forfeiting wins is picking up steam. It wasn't just the great UConn man, Dave Benedict, who said it. Thought it was interesting. Mark Pope, after the game, Kentucky on Wednesday night beats Texas. He kind of said the same. He said, we have to draw a line in the sand. Matt, if you have the sound, let's play Mark Pope talking about the exact same thing Torres was tweeting about midday on Wednesday.
One stopgap that is kind of spreading right now that maybe has some legs, it's kind of a last stand, is the NCAA does get to decide who gets to go to the NCAA tournament. Like, they get to decide that. They have that power. And so at some point when they've been very, very clear about what the rules that they're going to try and enforce, they might lose in court, but they still get to decide what games count towards the NCAA tournament. And I'm not saying that to penalize any team. I'm just saying that because at some point it is important that we take a stand and regain some tiny ounce of sanity. And until someone tells me different, I still believe the NCAA has full power over who gets in the NCAA tournament and what games they count towards your NCAA tournament bid. And at the end of the day, that is what drives all of us. So hopefully we'll take a stand there and clean this up for everybody. Because right now everybody is chasing their tails, and I think it's a place we can take a stand. I hope we will. This game matters too much. The NCAA tournament is too extraordinary a deal. These high school players and these young players and all these players matter too much. College basketball matters too much. It's just time to take a stand, bring a little bit of sanity to this deal, say it publicly, and let's move forward.
Listen, I've been critical of Mark Pope for some of the stuff on the court. I thought he totally nailed it there. You know, the only thing that I would disagree with is, you know, he did say something to the effect of, listen, I'm not trying to call out any school specifically. No, I think that's part of the problem. It's time to start calling out people specifically, right? And I'll go back and in defense of Alabama, I said this with the James Naji stuff. I thought with the James Naji stuff a month ago, I thought people were too soft on Scott Drew. And it felt like other coaches didn't want to call him out by name. I understand they have, I have respect for Scott Drew and I coach against Scott Drew and blah, 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 blah. And I said, no. Say it with your chest. Call him out by name. Because all I heard with Scott Drew was, well, I don't like this from Scott, but I can't blame him for doing this. And, I don't agree with Scott, but though there are no rules and no, say it with your chest. Do you think what Scott Drew did is screwed up? I had a coach, I swear on my life, because people were going to say you're making it up. I had a coach text me last night. I was watching the USC game at, 1 a.m. Eastern. They lost to Northwestern, by the way, bad loss. I had a coach texting me like, I can't root for Baylor. Scott Drew knows what he did was wrong. And and so it's the same with Nate Oats. Listen, I like Nate Oats. I've had Nate Oats on this show. He's always been very nice to me. And I actually think he's maybe top 2, top 3 coaches in college basketball. But instead of dancing around and, it's nobody's fault and we need rules. No. Say it with your freaking chest. What Nate Oats is doing is bad for college basketball. I think Mark Pope got about 80% of the way there, but call out Nate Oats. Say, no, Nate Oats, this is not good enough. And you know what the worst part about all this is? You know who's the biggest hypocrite out of all this? It's Nate Oats himself. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, You go back to a few weeks ago when all this started. Mark Pope just referenced this matters to college players and high school players and whatever. In the NCAA statement, they said we have to allow high school players to still have opportunities to play this sport. We can't just be bringing back 23, 24-year-olds. You know who agreed with that sentiment as of like a month ago? Nate Oats. He did an interview with SiriusXM after the James Naji situation where he was asked about the whole situation. What did he say? Well, I'm a former high school coach, and I hate that high school players aren't getting opportunities. Matt, play this.
I have to if they're eligible and somebody else is going to get them. Like I wouldn't say I'd be one of the guys that was necessarily for it to begin with, because I do think it's taken away opportunities from kids coming out of high school. That I was a high school coach for 11 years. I wanted my kids to get opportunities when they left my program. This is taking opportunities away from those kids, but on a competitive level, if it's allowable and they're going to be eligible to play and they're the better players you can get, then you probably got to go after them.
That was Nate Oats just a month ago. I was a former high school coach myself. I will defend Nate Oats. He did say with the caveat of if other people are doing this, I'm going to have to do it as well. Listen, somebody's got to step up. Somebody's got to draw a line in the sand. And the NCAA, I truly believe, even if you're going to lose in court, this is a stand that you have to take. Kick the can down the road. Say publicly, we have told you, again, for people just joining us, the difference between Bediako and James Naji is straightforward. James Naji, Baylor, for my criticism of them, Baylor went through the process with the NCAA. They waited till he got cleared. They decided to play him. Charles Bediako has not been cleared by the NCAA. He is an ineligible player. The NCAA has been clear that if you have signed an NBA contract or played in an NBA game, you are not eligible to play. I think the only choice the NCAA has, they have to release a statement. It's 11:30 Eastern time a.m. on Thursday morning when we're recording. I think by late Friday, they have to release a statement that says, bottom line, if Charles Bediako plays, he is an ineligible player, Alabama will forfeit every win in which he participates in. That's the only answer. That's the only resolution. Get a backbone. You'll probably lose in court. But again, if you don't draw the line in the sand, people are going to keep pushing this boundary. And it's going to be players who played in the NBA. It's going to be players who are no longer within the 5-year window. This is the tip of the iceberg. Last time, this isn't an Alabama thing. At some point, let me just last thing. At some point, you have to do what's best for the sport, even if it isn't best for you individually. Okay. And this is my last point. I swear I've been all over the place. I know. I was out in Tuscaloosa with my buddy Ryan Fowler, and I said, listen, I'm not a parent, but as a parent, don't you have to teach your children that even if something individually benefits you for the good of whatever, the family, your classroom, your friend group, whatever, you gotta sacrifice. And this is one. Nate Oats knows what he's doing is wrong. Nate Oats there will be no doubt that he knows that he is breaking whatever rules are left. The NCAA needs to come down on him. They need to punish him, and they need to publicly say, any game Charles Bediako plays in, any game that any former NBA player or dude who signed a professional contract plays in, is no longer eligible.